Why German pilots feared the Tuskegee Airmen. Red tails. Narrator, slow, dramatic. There is a line hidden in an old Luftwaffe pilot's diary that historians rarely mention, a sentence written with trembling hands after a disastrous mission. It reads, "Avoid the red tails. They do not break, ever." Those 8 haunting words reveal a fear deeper than any technological disadvantage, deeper than any loss of territory. For the first time in the war, German pilots had found an opponent who unnerved them completely, the Tuskegee Airmen. Visual. Slow-motion shot of red-tailed P-51 Mustangs slicing through clouds. To the Luftwaffe, the European sky had been their domain for years. They had mastered aerial combat with ruthless efficiency. Their Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf 190s ruled the air with cold precision. Their pilots were proud, confident, even arrogant, and in the early years of the war, nearly unbeatable. But in 1944, a new escort group arrived, unknown, untested, and instantly recognized by one unmistakable feature: their bright red tails. At first, German pilots mocked them. Bright markings usually meant rookies. They expected easy kills, quick victories, and another routine day of hunting slow American bombers. But what happened next shattered their assumptions. Instead of inexperienced pilots, they found disciplined guardians who refused to abandon their mission under any circumstances. The red tails stayed with the bombers no matter what, flying tight formations even under intense pressure. For bomber crews, it was a miracle. For the Luftwaffe, it was the beginning of a nightmare. The red tails were unlike any American escort group the Germans had seen. Other fighters often chased German decoys, leaving the bombers exposed. But the red tails? They never left their post. Not once. Every German pilot who attempted to break their defenses quickly learned that openings simply did not exist. The 332nd Fighter Group moved like a single organism, reacting with purpose, restraint, and unified intent. Visual. Red tails flying in protective formation around B-17 bombers. What the Germans failed to understand was that these pilots were fighting 2 wars at the same time. Before facing the Luftwaffe, they had already fought segregation, discrimination, and institutional exclusion back home. Many in the U.S. military believed African Americans couldn't succeed in combat aviation. The Tuskegee Airmen trained under harsher scrutiny than any other group. They understood that any mistake, no matter how small, could be used to justify continued racism. That pressure forged something stronger than skill. It created discipline, resilience, and an unbreakable sense of purpose. So when they were assigned bomber escort duty, they treated it as sacred. They did not chase personal glory, individual kills, or flashy dogfights. Their mission was simple: bring the bombers home alive. And they did again and again. One of the first major encounters that changed German perceptions occurred over Czechoslovakia. A formation of American V-24 Liberators rumbled toward its target like distant thunder. Below, a large group of German fighters formed up, ready to attack. They climbed steadily, expecting the usual chaos. Instead, they saw a wall of red-tailed Mustangs rising to meet them in perfect synchronization. These pilots did not hesitate. They did not break formation. They did not fall for distractions. They flew directly toward the Germans with astonishing confidence. The German squadron leader immediately sensed something was different. He later admitted he had never witnessed such fearless flying from an escort group. The red tails fought with calm intensity, their movements deliberate and precise. Every attempt to lure them away from the bombers failed. Every attack was intercepted with alarming speed. Visual. P-51 red tail diving on a German fighter throwing itself at a BOM. Fear spread rapidly among Luftwaffe units. Reports from surviving pilots varied, but all repeated the same unsettling message: the red tails do not make mistakes. They intercepted attacks with terrifying accuracy. They coordinated flawlessly. They showed none of the hesitation common among inexperienced groups. The Germans began referring to them as red-tailed devils, not because of brutality, but because of their relentless discipline. One captured German pilot provided a stunning confession. During interrogation, When asked why his squadron avoided certain bomber groups, he quietly answered, "The ones with the red tails, they fly like men who cannot afford failure." What he didn't know was that he was absolutely correct. The Tuskegee Airmen flew with the weight of history on their shoulders. Their performance had implications far beyond the war. Their success challenged deeply rooted beliefs, proving their worth in a world determined to doubt them. Yet discipline alone didn't explain everything. The Red Tails were exceptionally skilled. Their training was among the toughest in the American aviation program. They learned to master the P-51 Mustang, one of the fastest and most capable fighters of the war. They studied German tactics intensely, learning how to counter high-speed dives, slashing attacks, and bait maneuvers. When the Luftwaffe changed strategies, the Red Tails adapted instantly. Their reputation grew with every mission. Bomber crews trusted them completely. Commanders praised them. But German pilots feared them. And fear, especially among elite soldiers, is rare. The Red Tails produced something worse than fear: uncertainty. And uncertainty destroys morale faster than any bullet. They didn't lose bombers. They didn't scatter. They didn't panic. That consistency forced the Luftwaffe to change strategy. Instead of bold attacks, many German pilots simply avoided formations protected by red-tailed fighters. They knew those were the hardest to penetrate. Visual: German Mi-109 turning away as red tails approach. For the first time, the Luftwaffe realized these Americans weren't just skilled, they were unstoppable. They flew like men who carried something heavier than weapons: purpose, determination, legacy. So why did German pilots fear the Red Tails? Because they weren't just facing fighters. They were facing history in motion, pilots who refused to fail, refused to retreat, and refused to be anything less than perfect. That combination made them one of the most formidable escort groups of the entire war. Visual: a lone red-tail Mustang flying through golden sunset clouds. Their legend had only just begun. And the skies over Europe would never be the same. The rise of the Tuskegee Airmen did not begin in combat, it began years earlier, long before any red-tail Mustang crossed the skies of Europe. To understand why German pilots eventually feared them so deeply, we must go back to a time when the idea of Black Americans serving as military aviators was considered not just unlikely, but completely impossible. Throughout the 1930s, the U.S. War Department openly believed African Americans lacked the intelligence, coordination, and discipline required for aviation. These racist assumptions shaped official military policy for decades, closing the door on countless talented individuals who dreamed of flying. But the world was changing, and pressure from civil rights leaders, educators, journalists, and political allies forced the government to reconsider its stance. Out of this pressure came a decision that would reshape history: an experimental aviation training program for Black pilots. Tuskegee, Alabama, was chosen as the training site. The land was hot, rugged, and isolated, far from major cities or distractions. Yet it soon evolved into a symbol of transformation. Tuskegee Institute, founded by Booker T. Washington, already had a strong academic reputation. When the Army Air Corps partnered with it, the area transformed rapidly. Contractors built long runways, airfields, maintenance hangars, barracks, classrooms, and control towers. What began as an experiment soon looked like a full-scale military flight academy. The men who reported for training were not ordinary recruits. Many were university students or college graduates with backgrounds in engineering, mathematics, mechanical sciences, or advanced technical fields. They had grown up facing discrimination in every part of American life, yet each one carried an intense determination to prove their worth in a system designed to block their success. Every instructor, every commander, and every official in Washington watched them closely, waiting for them to fail. That pressure pushed the cadets to train harder than anyone expected. Every flight, landing, formation, and emergency maneuver was scrutinized with ruthless precision. Any mistake, any slip, could be used as evidence to shut down the program entirely. As a result, their discipline became unmatched. The men studied longer, trained harder, and pushed themselves further than other cadets at bases across the country. Slowly, they mastered the PT-17 Stearman, the AT-6 Texan, and finally the fast, high-performance P-40 Warhawk. When the first class graduated in 1942, receiving their silver wings, it marked one of the most important breakthroughs in American military history. These aviators formed the 99th Fighter Squadron, the United States' first black combat pilots. But their victory was only the beginning. Many officers still doubted them. Some commanders tried to assign them to positions far from combat. Reports circulated claiming they would fail in real battle. Yet those doubts collapsed the moment the Tuskegee Airmen deployed to North Africa. Flying older P-40s against experienced German and Italian pilots, the 99th proved their courage immediately. They escorted bombers, attacked ground positions, and faced skilled enemy air forces head-on. Their teamwork stood out. They did not panic. They did not break formation. They fought as a unified, disciplined unit, something bomber crews noticed right away. Their reputation grew after each mission, and soon the program expanded into a full fighter group, the 332nd, composed of the 99th, 100th, 301st, and 302nd Squadrons. This expansion came with an aircraft that would define their legacy, the P-51 Mustang. Sleek, fast, and incredibly long-ranged, it was the perfect escort fighter. Tuskegee ground crews painted each tail bright red so American bombers could identify them instantly. No one knew then that this simple paint stripe would soon strike fear into the hearts of Luftwaffe pilots. Unlike other American escort units, the Red Tails adopted a philosophy that set them apart. Many fighter groups chased enemy aircraft for personal glory, often leaving bombers exposed. But the Tuskegee Airmen refused to abandon their mission. Their orders were simple: protect the bombers at all costs. They did not chase kills. They did not break formation for personal ambition. They flew with unity, purpose, and an unshakable determination to prove themselves. Meanwhile, the Luftwaffe faced increasing pressure. Years of combat had drained Germany's best pilots. Fuel was running low. Aircraft production struggled to keep pace with Allied bombing. Veteran pilots were being replaced by younger, less experienced recruits. Despite these setbacks, the Luftwaffe remained dangerous. Their tactics were sharp, their planes capable, and their confidence deeply rooted in years of European domination. But when German pilots encountered the Red Tails for the first time, they were stunned. The Tuskegee formations were impossibly tight, almost military perfect. The Mustangs ignored bait tactics, refused to scatter, and never left the bombers unguarded. German wing leaders reported these new escorts as unusually disciplined. Some said stubborn, some said precise, but many said lethal. The Luftwaffe's favorite traps failed. Their diversion maneuvers failed. Their swarm attacks failed. Every tactic that worked against other American units collapsed against the calm, calculated defense of the Red Tails. Mission after mission, the bombers they escorted reported fewer losses. Soon bomber groups began requesting them specifically. They trusted the Red Tails more than any other escort unit. By 1944, the reputation of the Tuskegee Airmen had spread across Europe. German pilots were warned, if you see Red Tails, expect a battle you might not win. What began as an experiment, an attempt many believed would fail, had become one of the most respected and feared fighter groups in the entire U.S. Army Air Forces. The discipline, bravery, and unity of the Tuskegee Airmen transformed them from doubted outsiders into symbols of excellence. And as the skies over Europe darkened with smoke and fire, a new chapter was forming, one that would reveal why German pilots would soon fear the Red Tails more than any other American fighters. Narrator, tense, cinematic. The true test of the Tuskegee Airmen came not in classrooms or on training fields, but in the skies over Europe, where war had turned the clouds into a battlefield. By 1943, the Allied strategic bombing campaign was escalating. B-17 Flying Fortresses and B-24 Liberators carried thousands of pounds of explosives toward German industrial centers and rail hubs. But these bombers were vulnerable. Without fighter escorts, they were easy prey for the Luftwaffe, whose Messerschmitt Bf 109s and Focke-Wulf 190s waited like shadows, ready to strike. The Red Tails moment had arrived. Visual. Archival footage of massive bomber formations cutting through misty European skies, engines roaring. Flying long distances from bases in Italy, pilots faced not only the enemy but exhaustion, poor weather, and complex coordination. Every flight carried the risk of death, not just from German guns, but from mechanical failure or fatigue. Despite these challenges, the Tuskegee Airmen demonstrated remarkable composure. Each P-51 Mustang flew in tight formation, engines screaming, red tails flashing against the clouds, signaling unity and strength. Visual. Close-up of P-51 Mustangs in formation, sunlight glinting off polished wings, red tails prominent. One of the first encounters occurred over Cagliari, Sardinia, during an escort mission for B-24 Liberators. German fighters dove from above in deadly slashing passes. Pilots of other escort groups sometimes broke formation, chasing enemy planes and leaving bombers exposed. The Red Tails did the opposite. They held position, trading fire only when necessary, protecting every bomber. Observers later described it as a wall of steel moving with terrifying precision, a living shield against the Luftwaffe. Visual. CGI reenactment of P-51s intercepting diving Bf 109s, tracer rounds streaking across the sky. German pilots, expecting chaos and disarray, were stunned. The Red Tails did not panic or scatter. They attacked with coordinated maneuvers, punishing any attacker foolish enough to strike. One German squadron leader later confessed in mission reports, "We faced pilots who did not flee, who did not falter. They struck with precision. They were everywhere at once." The Tuskegee Airmen's reputation grew not just because of skill, but because of their philosophy. Unlike other fighter groups, their mission was never personal glory. They did not pursue enemy fighters if it meant leaving bombers unguarded. Every action was calculated and disciplined. Their objective was singular: ensure the safety of the bombers. And they achieved it. Bomber loss rates under Red Tail protection dropped significantly compared to other groups, earning admiration from crews and concern from German pilots. Visual. Archival footage of bomber gunners firing. P-51s looping overhead to intercept enemy aircraft. Their skill was more than technical, it was psychological. German pilots realized any attack against red tail formations would be met immediately attempt to dive, and a red tail would block the angle, forcing retreat or destruction. When swarms attacked, red tails coordinated defensive fire, covering each other and the bombers. The Germans called them the red-tailed devils, not for cruelty, but for terrifying efficiency. Visual. Close-up of German pilot cockpit POV, P-51s appearing like shadows, firing deflecting shots. One mission over southern Germany illustrates their combat philosophy. Over 40 B-17s headed for Regensburg. A squadron of 20 Luftwaffe fighters dove from high altitude. Chaos seemed imminent. Other American escorts scattered, leaving bombers exposed. The 332nd held formation. For P-51s engaged each attacker, cutting them off. The rest maintained a protective umbrella over the bombers. By the time the B-17s reached their target, not a single plane was lost. News of the mission reached Washington, earning commendations for the squadron. Visual. CGI of P-51s swooping to intercept Bf 109s, bombers flying untouched beneath the protective canopy. The Red Tails' approach was methodical. They trained in dogfighting and bomber escort techniques, studying German tactics such as head-on attacks, dive bombing runs, and bait formations. When Luftwaffe pilots tried these tactics against them, the Tuskegee Airmen adapted instantly, adjusting altitude, speed, and angles with near-perfect timing. Every maneuver minimized risk and maximized protection. Their coordination on a massive scale was unparalleled. Visual. Map overlay showing bomber flight paths, P-51 coverage zones, enemy approach vectors. Despite their success, missions were not without sacrifice. Several Red Tails were lost in combat, and each weighed heavily on the group. Even in grief, they maintained discipline. Response to losses was calm adherence to mission plans, reinforcing German perceptions of their relentlessness. Visual: archival photos of P-51 crash sites, pilots being rescued, squadron members saluting fallen comrades. By 1944, the Red Tails became symbols of fear and respect. German intelligence noted their discipline: avoid encounters if possible, because the Red Tails were unusually precise, coordinated, and fearless. Their reputation was built on dozens of missions, hundreds of combat hours, and consistency few groups matched. Bomber crews requested them, commanders relied on them, and German pilots hesitated when spotting the Red Tails. Visual: slow motion of a red-tail Mustang slicing past clouds, tracer rounds following, bomber crews watching. By the end of 1944, the Tuskegee Airmen had flown hundreds of missions, including deep raids into Germany. They earned over 150 distinguished flying crosses collectively. They destroyed enemy aircraft, but more importantly, protected countless bombers and lives. Their discipline, unity, and tactical approach made them one of the most effective escort groups in the war. German pilots feared them not just for firepower, but for their unbreakable resolve. Visual: montage of P-51 formations, red tails flashing, bomber formations moving safely. The impact of the Red Tails was strategic and symbolic. Strategically, they reduced bomber losses and ensured mission success. Symbolically, they shattered racial prejudice, proving skill, courage, and discipline were not determined by race. German pilots, who had dominated European skies, finally encountered disciplined, unflinching adversaries who forced them to hesitate, retreat, or rethink tactics. Visual: archival footage of victorious Red Tails returning to base, mechanics servicing planes, pilots debriefing. By the war's conclusion, the Red Tails' reputation was cemented. They earned Allied respect, terrorized German aviators, and secured a place in history as one of the most disciplined and courageous fighter groups of World War II. Their actions, commitment, and protection of bombers against overwhelming odds were unmatched. German pilots feared them, not for speed or numbers, but for precision, consistency, and unbreakable resolve. Tails changed the sky forever. Narrator: slow, dramatic. By 1944, the Tuskegee Airmen had earned a reputation that spread not only among Allied forces, but deep into the Luftwaffe. Reports reached German high command describing an escort group that refused to break formation, shielding bombers with precision and discipline unseen before. Yet the world didn't fully grasp the twist. The Red Tails were rewriting aerial warfare rules in ways even their commanders could not yet measure. Visual: archival maps of bomber routes, red arrows indicating Tuskegee escort coverage. The Germans initially assumed they faced a standard fighter group, skilled, perhaps disciplined, but limited. They expected errors, hesitation, openings to exploit. And then the Red Tails appeared. They defied expectations. They did not chase glory or abandon formation. They protected, adapted, and executed with flawless timing. Luftwaffe reports soon reflected an almost mythic frustration. One commander wrote, "We are unsure what strikes first, the bombers or the Red Tails. There is no opening. There is no weakness." Visual: slow-motion P-51 Mustangs cutting through clouds, tracer rounds intersecting enemy aircraft. The twist was not just skill, it was psychological dominance. The Red Tails forced German pilots to confront uncertainty in a way no machine, tactic, or maneuver could predict. Every encounter tested nerves. Attack angles were blocked. Swarms of fighters met a perfectly timed response. Bait formations failed. The Red Tails anticipated moves, not through luck, but through preparation, study of enemy tactics, and unyielding discipline. The effect on the Luftwaffe was profound. Experienced pilots hesitated. Mid-air aggression slowed. Decisions normally instinctive were reconsidered. Entire formations altered routes to avoid engagement. Some reports described it as facing a wall that cannot be broken. This was not merely tactical, it was a crisis of perception. The Red Tails had inserted doubt into the enemy mind, and in war, doubt can be fatal. Visual, CGI overlay showing German formations avoiding red tail coverage. There was another layer. The red tails were fighting not just the Luftwaffe, but history. Each pilot carried the weight of prejudice, the burden of proving their place in a military that had doubted them. Every bomber saved became proof that skill transcended race, discipline could overcome institutional doubt, and excellence could rewrite assumptions about who could fight and who could dominate the skies. Visual, archival footage of Tuskegee Airmen saluting, boarding P-51s, mechanics preparing planes. One remarkable mission highlights this impact. Over southern Germany, a formation of B-17s was targeted by 15 Luftwaffe fighters. Standard procedure might have resulted in bomber losses and chaos. The red tails responded with near-surgical coordination. Pairs of Mustangs split to intercept attackers, forcing retreats, engaging in dogfights only when necessary, continuously rotating coverage over the bombers. In the end, not a single bomber was lost. German pilots returned shaken. Reports noted, these pilots do not fear death. They fear nothing. And we cannot predict what they will do next. Visual, CGI of P-51s weaving through German fighters, bombers safe below. The twist was further amplified by the long-term consequences of the red tails philosophy. By refusing to chase personal kills, they ensured bomber survival, strengthening the Allied strategic bombing campaign. Cities that might have been spared saw devastation. Supply lines were disrupted. German morale suffered. The red tails' discipline created ripple effects far beyond any single dogfight. Visual, overlay of bombing maps with red tail coverage, arrows showing improved bomber success rates. The red tails also reshaped Luftwaffe tactics. Pilots who survived encounters began avoiding certain missions. Younger pilots were warned against engagement. Veteran aces hesitated. Squadron morale declined when facing formations they could not outmaneuver. The red tails had turned a small group into a strategic lever influencing entire campaigns. Their effect was psychological, operational, transformational. Visual, slow pan over German airfields, pilots in briefings, maps showing altered attack plans. Even among American forces, the twist was evident. Commanders requested red tail escorts for the most dangerous missions. Bomber losses dropped. Intelligence officers documented the psychological effect on the enemy. Pilots once dismissed as experimental trainees became integral to planning. Their reputation was measurable, documented, undeniable. Visual, archival photos of bomber crews waving at P-51 escorts, flight logs being reviewed. Yet the most profound twist was human. The red tail's success proved excellence, preparation, and unity could overcome systemic prejudice. Every dogfight became a battle against discrimination. Every bomber saved was a statement that talent could not be confined by color lines. The Tuskegee Airmen were combat heroes and symbols of a broader fight for justice, equality, and recognition. Visual, archival shots of Tuskegee cadets in training, determined faces, engines roaring in slow motion. German pilots could not fully grasp this dual layer of power. They feared the red tails because they were skilled and disciplined, but even more because the pilots carried an intangible, unknowable resolve. It was not bravado or luck, it was preparation, unity, and unwavering commitment to a mission larger than themselves. That combination created an enemy unlike any they had faced, one that could not be predicted or broken, forcing hesitation where hesitation meant vulnerability. Visual, slow-motion red-tail Mustang diving past enemy fighters, bombs safely below. By the end of 1944, the red tails had reduced bomber losses and reshaped perceptions of American air power and African American pilots. They were a twist in history, a challenge to the Luftwaffe, an inspiration to millions. Their discipline and courage forced the enemy to reconsider tactics, assumptions, and the potential of men they had long dismissed. Visual, final montage of red tails flying in formation, sun glinting off red tails, engines roaring, bombers safe beneath. The twist of the Tuskegee Airmen story is clear. The red tails were more than pilots. They were innovators, symbols, tactical geniuses who changed aerial combat. German pilots feared them not for firepower alone, but for the unyielding determination behind every mission, formation, and protective sweep over the bombers. The skies would never be the same. Visual: slow fade of a red-tail Mustang disappearing into clouds, sun breaking through, symbolizing legacy. Narrator: slow, reflective, cinematic. The story of the Tuskegee Airmen does not end when the war in Europe concluded. Their battle extended beyond the skies, reaching into the hearts and minds of a nation that still doubted them. The Red Tails had proven their courage, skill, and discipline under fire, yet the recognition they deserved was delayed. Visual: archival footage of P-51 Mustangs returning to base, silhouettes of pilots walking with their helmets, mechanics rushing to serve as planes. By 1945, the 332nd Fighter Group had flown hundreds of missions. They earned over 150 distinguished flying crosses collectively. Their achievements were measured not only in enemy aircraft destroyed, but in countless bombers protected. Every mission demonstrated precision, discipline, and unyielding dedication. Yet, even after these feats, segregation persisted in the military and across American society. Heroism in combat did not automatically translate into respect or equality. Visual: archival photos of Tuskegee Airmen deboarding planes, contrasted with signs of segregation in public spaces and bus stops. Despite these challenges, their impact was undeniable. The tactics they perfected, escort strategies, formation discipline, and combat engagement protocols, became models for future air operations. Modern fighter groups, long-range escort missions, and aerial combat training all drew lessons from the Red Tails. Their methods established standards that continue to influence air combat strategy today. Visual: CGI overlay showing P-51 formations morphing into modern jet fighter formations. German pilots continued to fear the Red Tails even after the war. Interrogation reports, diaries, and memoirs revealed encounters that haunted Luftwaffe veterans. Facing disciplined, unbreakable pilots who refused to panic forced German commanders to reconsider engagement tactics. Many avoided confrontation, altered flight paths, or hesitated entirely when spotting the bright red. Their influence went beyond immediate combat. It affected strategy, morale, and enemy planning. Visual: archival Luftwaffe mission logs, squadron annotations highlighting Red Tail encounters. Yet the deepest significance of the Red Tails was symbolic. These African-American pilots, once underestimated and doubted, demonstrated that skill, discipline, and courage know no color. Every mission flown, every bomber protected, was a statement against prejudice. Their achievements disproved long-held stereotypes, proving that excellence under extreme conditions was universal. Visual: montage of Tuskegee cadets in training, focused faces, engines roaring, planes taking off. Their success had lasting consequences for military policy. By 1948, just 3 years after World War II ended, President Truman signed Executive Order 9981, desegregating the armed forces. The courage, discipline, and achievements of the Tuskegee Airmen created the environment for this historic change. They reshaped not only aerial combat, but also the social structure of the U.S. military, demonstrating that ability and valor transcend race. Visual: archival footage of Truman signing the order, integration of units, Black officers assuming leadership roles. The story also carries a powerful what if. If prejudice had not delayed deployment or limited their numbers, the Red Tails could have influenced the air war even more decisively. German pilots faced extreme challenges whenever these pilots were present. Entire bombing missions succeeded under their protection. A fully resourced and fully trusted Red Tail force could have changed strategies, minimized Allied losses further, and accelerated the end of the air war in Europe. Visual: CGI of expanded Red Tail formations intercepting Luftwaffe squadrons over European skies. Their legacy continues in modern aviation. Every fighter wing, every long-range escort mission, and every emphasis on precision, coordination, and discipline reflects the lessons of the Tuskegee Airmen. Their story shows that preparation, teamwork, and focus outweigh individual heroics. Red-tail discipline became a standard for excellence, inspiring pilots and leaders decades later. Visual: modern fighter jets taking off in formation, contrails tracing the sky, echoing the red-tail's impact. The red-tail's story also warns that talent alone is insufficient. Vision without opportunity, skill without recognition, and courage without support cannot reach full potential. The Tuskegee Airmen succeeded because they combined preparation, resilience, and dedication under extreme adversity. Their delayed recognition underscores how prejudice and bureaucracy can suppress even the most capable individuals. Visual: archival juxtaposition of red tails in combat with segregated training facilities, highlighting skill versus social barriers. For German pilots, Allied bomber crews, and history itself, the red tails were an unbreakable force. Their bright red P-51 tails were warnings. Any enemy pilot who saw them knew they faced a disciplined, precise, and relentless adversary. Each mission left a mark on history, shaping tactics, morale, and the evolution of aerial combat. Visual: P-51 Mustangs glinting in sunlight, flying over bomber formations, red tails prominently visible. Decades later, their story continues to inspire. From civil rights movements to modern military strategy, the red tails exemplify leadership, preparation, and moral courage. Museums, documentaries, and educational programs honor their legacy. The fear they once inspired in German pilots has transformed into global admiration and respect. Visual: archival and modern footage of Tuskegee Airmen reunions, museum exhibits, and educational programs. The final punch of their story is both triumphant and sobering. They changed the outcome of air campaigns, reshaped perceptions of race and ability, and left a tactical and symbolic legacy that continues to resonate. Yet we are left asking, what more could have been accomplished if fully trusted, resourced, and recognized from the beginning? Visual: slow-motion P-51 Mustang disappearing into clouds at sunset, engines roaring. The Tuskegee Airmen were more than pilots, they were trailblazers. German pilots feared them because of unmatched discipline, skill, and resolve. The European skies had never seen such precision or courage. Their story reminds us that the greatest victories are not always measured in kills or missions, but in the legacy left, barriers broken, and inspiration provided for future generations. Visual: final shot of P-51 Mustangs in tight formation, sun breaking through clouds, red tails flashing. The red tail's story leaves one lasting question: how many other histories remain untold, waiting for courage, preparation, and determination to reveal them? Their answer flies in the skies above, in every pilot daring to defy expectation, and in every individual turning adversity into triumph. Visual: fade to black, text overlay, Tuskegee Airmen, red tails, fear, courage, and legacy. Orchestral music swells and fades.